I was new in town, but having had a terrible time dating in Austin, I knew New York would be much more difficult. I decided to give myself a head start. A couple of months before the move, I signed up myself with Match.com. 10 years ago, that was the I'm serious dating profile. At this point, I was in my mid-30s, had a successful law career, but I hadn't had any relationship that lasted more than 2 years. And everyone who came into my life after that point had a serious, massive flaw in some way. There was the environmentalist who insisted on only riding his bike, meaning we could never go anywhere together, which could have been a metaphor for his selfishness. And there was the broker who was perpetually late. Not 10 minutes late, but always at least an hour late. Again, self-involved, self-centered. And let's not forget the vegetarian co-op owner who cried when I ordered a steak. I mean, it was a T-bone, not a sacrificial lamb. I clearly have a type: tall, thin, wiry, cerebral, and in retrospect, they were all narcissists. But as it turns out, that's a difficult type to shake. When I landed in New York, I'd already been talking to a few guys online. I've always really been into music, more indie than anything else. Think Andrew Bird, the old 97s, Beirut, Iron and Wine, that sort of thing. There were lots of concerts, great dinners out, but things always seemed to just peter out. People definitely have shiny object syndrome in New York. They might take you out once or twice, but then they just fade away when they become interested in the next shiny object. That's about when I met Jake. He planned amazing dates. Like me, he's always been really into music. He's a great music agent now for some of the biggest EDM acts in the world. But just a few short years ago, he was focused on promoting. He had great relationships with some of the best venues in town, and we'd always slip in behind the DJ booth or meet the club owners. But in the beginning, I was very on the fence about him. First of all, he's bald and he's chunky. He was also just so sappy, the type who would quote poetry to you, kiss the back of your hand. It was all just too much. But he knew all sorts of people, so I decided that we should be friends. This seemed fine with him. One night I was out on the town with my friend Margot, having dinner, hitting up various bars. Jake texted me that he was in the neighborhood and he offered to drive us to our next destination. Almost no one in New York City has a car. We were having a terrible time getting a cab, so I said, sure. Margot and I got in the car and Jake was engaging, funny, and charming. He told us a couple of stories about clients he was dealing with, and Margot, who was separated from her husband, was lapping it up. We got to our destination and Jake winked at me as he got out of the car, as if he knew. As soon as he was out of sight, Margot turned to me and said, "What is wrong with you? That guy is awesome. He's cute. He's successful. He's interesting. Why didn't you throw that one back? If you don't want him, I'll take him." Hearing Margot say that actually hit me in the stomach. Margot's attractive, maybe a bit basic, but men seem to like her. I literally went home that night and couldn't sleep at all. I pulled out all the pictures from the idiots I dated for, realizing that they all cared more about their own reflections than they did about me. That wasn't the case with Jake. He seemed to genuinely like me, to really care about me. I'd never seen him as anything but the bald, dumpy guy, not an object of desire. But Margot changed that, and it felt as if I'd been smacked by the truth. My feelings changed, and they changed that quickly. So we started dating, and at first it was still too much. The sappiness was overwhelming and saccharine. He would post pictures of me on Facebook after every time we did anything together. He wasn't afraid to proclaim to the world how wonderful I was, how much he cared about me. Just gush, gush, gush. I remember walking to the subway talking to Margot. I was at my wit's end. I wanted to break up with him because the super sappy, cringy declarations of love and adoration were just too much. Once again, she pulled back the layers. I needed to tell him that I liked him, but he needed to take it down a notch. Keep in mind, I've had conversations with other partners about things that needed to change, and rarely does anything ever happen. They might make a half-hearted effort and then go back to the previous behavior. That's not what happened with Jake. I tried to be very calm in my delivery. I definitely used my negotiation training for the conversation. I watched his face as I was telling him how I felt, and it was expressionless. Folded his hands in his lap, crossed his legs, and just listened. When I finished, I mean this without exaggeration, he never, ever again, publicly or privately, expressed his feelings for me. Yes, we continued to date. Yes, we eventually moved in together. Yes, we got engaged. We got married. We had a child. But from that moment on, any exuberant expressions of love Jake had for me shifted. Even in Facebook posts for my birthday, I write something like, "This is Catherine. It's her birthday." There are degrees of affection, of love. I know that Jake is steadfast in his love for our little family. He's a great father, and he adores our son. I often think back to that day and wonder if I'd do things differently. I wonder if it's better to have syrupy sweet sentiment or none at all. I did try to bring it up to him once, but I could see in his eyes that the tap was turned off. And no matter how I behave towards him, or how much love I show or don't show, the dynamic changed. The switch was flipped, and now I'm left with a person I love, but a person who holds the power. And while he's not shut off from love, he's shut off from expressing it. I can see sparks of it with our son, but I'm afraid nothing will ever let the switch flip back for us. We've been together now for almost 10 years, and the punishment, it's really alienation of sentiment, has lasted for 9.5 years. If I'm honest with myself, I love him more than I did before. Strike that, I didn't love him before. Then the sentimentality ended, and I fell in love with him. So when I mentioned before that I have a thing for narcissists, they don't always come in the obvious packages. Sometimes they're the schlubby guy you didn't expect to fall for. When the tables turn, you realize that you can only love people who don't actually love you. So that's me, not the narcissist, but the classic textbook definition of a masochist.